With only 10 days left to go in the presidential election, Donald Trump is now tied in the Real Clear Politics polling aggregate. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And today we're going to be talking about why a Trump victory is essentially inevitable in 2024. So, when you look at a tied national popular vote, I need you guys to understand a couple things. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by roughly 2 points and still narrowly lost the presidential election despite winning the popular vote by 2. States like Colorado, Nevada, Minnesota, Maine, and New Hampshire even almost went into the Republican column despite them winning the popular vote by even 2 points. Now, a state like New Hampshire, Maine, New Mexico, New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, those have gotten more Democrat. But when you look at some of these margins in 2020 for Virginia, New Mexico, Minnesota, Maine at large, and New Hampshire, that was really fueled by some enthusiasm had with Biden, with some English white voters and some German and as well as Dutch English and white kind of voters. Those are the three demographics that were very excited for Joe Biden in that election. And it was also a cultural phenomenon in these big tech areas with a large millennial and Gen Z population, these big growing areas. It was kind of a cultural phenomenon to kind of just mail in your mail-in ballot as a protest vote against the former president. However, that has changed. Those type of voters are the voters that Vance is appealing to, the type of voters that Trump's economic, reform are appealing to. And so these inflated margins in a place like Virginia and a place like New Hampshire, Minnesota, Maine, those are not going to really stick around. And if he's actually tied in the popular vote, let's say it's accurate. Let's say the RCP aggregate is accurate, which I don't believe it is. I think Trump's going to win the popular vote by multiple points. And we're going to see the RCP aggregate kind of start matching that pretty well. If we go over here and look at this, let's say that this is accurate, right? Let's say that this is accurate, that the popular vote is tied. If the popular vote is tied, Donald Trump is already winning the 2024 election. This is assuming that all demographics shift Republican at an equal rate. Of course, if it were tied, that's not what would happen. But assuming that every single demographic would shift evenly towards Donald Trump, if the popular vote were tied, he'd effectively be winning 312 electoral college votes. Nevada would be essentially flipping into the GOP column. Arizona would be in the Republican column at 4 points. Georgia would be almost a 5-point win. Same thing for North Carolina. Florida would be a 7-point win. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, they would all be lean Republican. Iowa and Ohio would be 11-point victories for Donald Trump. Minnesota and New Hampshire are in the lean Democrat column as well. And Maine at large would almost be below a 5-point win alongside Virginia. So it's pretty interesting to see how this is kind of playing out right now. And when we look at the aggregates here, I mean, right now, Kamala Harris is polling 8 points worse than Joe Biden and polling 5.1 percentage points worse than Hillary Clinton did just a couple years ago. And we see that Donald Trump is making humongous strides in the Electoral College. If he were to keep expanding his lead here, let's say he keeps gaining a couple points here, if he were to essentially go ahead and win the popular vote by a little bit over 2, states like Minnesota would get really competitive. A lot of the Rust Belt states would almost be likely. So you'd see, there's kind of a weird area where if he's winning the popular vote by even 1, there's some sort of like regression. But as you get more and more Republican, let's say he's winning the popular vote by, I believe here now he's winning it by 4. At that point, a state like Minnesota would be in play. However, when you see the popular vote be Trump plus 2, which is what Rasmussen reports is indicating, a bunch of new polls are indicating Trump is now up in the latest New York Times poll by a single percentage point in the full field, even though they don't report that as the top line, which is kind of hilarious. But when you look at it overall, Donald Trump is doing very well. If the college educated group were to basically shift Republican by like a pretty decent amount, those big leads in like New Hampshire and Maine would effectively be gone. Even if you were to shift like non-college, that would already erase a lot of the lead that you see there, including in these kind of areas. So it's very interesting to kind of see that take place. A lot of those big leads would effectively be erased. African American support for Joe Biden also did help him out in a place like Virginia. You may possibly see a phenomenon where Minnesota is voting to the left. It could happen of Virginia. It's possible. It kind of just depends, because if that were to be the case, that means that non-college, or college educated whites and non-college whites would have to be moving to the right slower than African Americans would. And in order for that to happen, he'd have to be winning like 20 something percent of the African American vote. Like, he'd have to be doing very well for Virginia to be kind of voting to the right of the nation. That's kind of why I still hold the belief that Minnesota would flip before Virginia, just because of the fact that you would have to have ridiculously good GOP African American turnout compared to the other groups in order for that to even occur. But guys, at the end of the day, if he's tied in the popular vote, he is winning the Electoral College. There's no debate about it, because those groups would all move towards the center of the nation. And at that point, there's really no way for her to kind of win, because she's basically maxed out with all these demographics. At that point, she's basically deadlocked, because if she's losing 4.5 points from Joe Biden, there effectively is no path for her at all to win the presidency if she's doing 4.5 points worse in the popular vote than Joe Biden was. So that is something pretty interesting that I think that you guys should be looking at. And another interesting thing is that Joe Biden ahead by 8 points. He won by 4.5. That's a 3.5 point shift. If you applied that to this popular vote or this current aggregate, if you were to adjust it, Trump would be up by 3.5. And if you look at October 25th and you see for 2016, Hillary Clinton, she's polling 3 points worse, or that was a 3-point overestimation as of this time. If you apply that to the tied popular vote from today, Trump would be up by 3. And funny enough, there is theoretically mathematical possibility here in this aggregate now, because everyone was saying, oh, there's no way that Trump can win the popular vote by 3 in the head-to-head because Kamala Harris was over 49. But Kamala Harris has now dropped below 49, and actually, if Trump were to win all the remaining undecideds, he would win by 3. Now, the problem is, this is not the matchup. The actual matchup is the multi-candidate polls, where he is also now tied, both at 47.5% to Harris's 47.5%. Kennedy at about 1, Stein at about 0.9, West at about 0.6, Oliver at 0.5. So what's really fascinating is they're both now tied at 47.5. If Trump were to kind of just win a couple of the undecideds, he'd be up by about 2 to 3, which is usually what happens, because when he gets underestimated in the aggregate, usually what happens is the Democrat candidate share is actually about the same. What ends up happening is his vote share gets underestimated by a couple points. You see it right here. He outperformed the polls by almost 3 points there. And if he does that again, or even does it by 1 or 2, I mean, he's still going to win the popular vote by a decent amount. Clinton, if we go over here, it's roughly the same in a way. If we see here, Clinton ended up outperforming hers by about 2. This is mainly because it was the head-to-head. If you were to look at the party, the multi-candidate party aggregate, that'd be kind of interesting. We can actually see it here. She still ended up outperforming it, but Trump technically did better. That's the thing. Trump outperformed his own polling better. And Johnson and Stein kind of underperformed there, as you see there. So that is pretty interesting to see that kind of shift actually occur in the aggregate. So very, very fascinating. But we do see that right now, he's the one who mostly underperforms his aggregate. And with low third-party turnout, she's not going to really be outperforming, or at least Kamala Harris is, given the fact that she has very inflated favorable ratings. That's also a problem for Kamala Harris. She's got very inflated favorable ratings as well. And so it's very interesting to see how that is actually going to play out as of right now. But Donald Trump being tied in the RCP aggregate, if the election were to just stop and this were the election, he would essentially get this map as of right now, which I'm projecting he's going to get an even bigger map than this, because my own polling aggregate shows a more Republican race of about an R+3 national environment as of right now. And so if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.